In Baki, he's known as the strongest man in the USA and the only man who truly has complete freedom, hence his nickname, Mr. Unchained. This character is a monster, both in terms of his fighting and his muscle mass. If you've ever heard of the anime Baki, then chances are you're familiar with his name. We are, of course, talking about the one and only Biscuit Oliva, or Oliver. In my opinion, this character has one of the best bodybuilding style of physiques in all of anime. This isn't just because of his muscle mass, but rather the aesthetic flow of his physique. He is the Unchained. But did you know that he was modeled after a myth? A myth that had godlike aesthetics. A myth that was the #1 best built man in the world. And a myth that was a reality. On July 4th, 1941, a baby was born in Cuba, and his name, Sergio Oliva. He grew up to be strong and was said to be able to perform over 400 pounds on the clean and jerk. According to Wiki, this caught the attention of the Cuban government. They selected Sergio to represent Cuba at the upcoming 1961 Pan American Games. This would take place in Jamaica, and during that time, Oliva actually snuck out of his quarters while the guards were distracted. He ran at top speed until he was safely inside the American consulate. He demanded and received political asylum. Soon afterwards, Oliva was living in Miami, Florida, working as a TV repairman. From there, he would take his love of weightlifting and direct it towards the sport of bodybuilding. He stood in at 5'10" and weighed about 225 pounds all the way up to 245 pounds in the off-season. He was said to have 22.5-inch arms and, even more impressively, a 27-inch waist. For someone that weighs over 200 pounds, that's absolutely incredible. I mean, hell, I'm under 200 pounds and my waist is way thicker than that. It was said that he had godlike genetics, as if carved like a Greek sculpture. And he went far into bodybuilding, further than most could have imagined, further than anyone had up until that point in time. In fact, he debuted as a pro in 1966 at the Mr. World, and only 1 year later he ended up winning the IFBB Mr. Olympia competition, which is the biggest bodybuilding competition in the world. He went on to win 2 more years after that, and perhaps even more impressively, he even beat Arnold Schwarzenegger at the Mr. Olympia, which made him the last person to ever do so. However, the following year, Arnold would best him, and then the next year he would be banned from competing in the Mr. Olympia because he had competed in the Mr. Universe. And that's because it was in a different division and there was a conflict of interest. Apparently it was very controversial because Arnold did the same thing the year prior, and there were no repercussions. He would compete a few more times, but after some time off, he came back in 1984 and 1985 at the age of 43 and 44 to try his run at the Mr. Olympia competition a few more times, and both times he placed 8th, which is really not bad at all for someone in their mid-40s. Some other interesting facts about him were that he served as a police officer in Chicago for 25 years, which is strangely similar to another person that Biscuit Oliva was modeled after, Ronnie Coleman, who was arguably the best bodybuilder of all time and also a police officer. But one thing that I found really interesting was that in 1986, Sergio survived being shot by his then wife and sustained 5 bullet wounds. If you're familiar with Biscuit Oliva in Baki, then you know there's a scene where he actually gets shot as well. Except in this scene, the bullets just literally bounce off of him. When I found this out about Sergio, I was really baffled that he could survive this. I'm really not sure where he was shot and if his muscles had anything to do with helping him survive, but it's definitely an interesting correlation to the show. So along with this, another correlation between the character and Sergio Oliva is that apparently their personalities were very similar. The writers of the show actually based the personality of Biscuit Oliva off of Sergio. In real life, Sergio Oliva was larger than life, having won 20 first-place bodybuilding titles. And on top of this, he was the first non-white athlete to win Mr. America, Mr. World, Mr. International, Mr. Universe, and Mr. Olympia. It is said that with his extremely massive measurements and unusually small waist, Oliva is considered to be the most genetically gifted bodybuilder of all time. Quite the person to model such an anime character after. Unfortunately, he passed away due to kidney failure in November 2012 at the age of 71. But his son, Sergio Oliva Jr., now carries the torch and is a hell of a bodybuilder himself. Sergio Sr. would go down as one of the greatest bodybuilders of the 20th century and will be remembered in the community for a long time. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. And let me know your favorite fact about Sergio Oliva in the comments below.